And we're now onto that part where we give people a platform to share their views on certain subjects. And today we are putting our focus on violence against women. Like we all know, the United Nations has come up with a He for She campaign that is geared towards ending violence against women, not just here, but across the continent and around the world, because we see at least maybe 1 in 4 young girls under the age of 18 who are subjected to violence, and at least 1 in every 3 people have faced some sort of violence in whichever way. It could even be, being beaten up, it could be sexual violence, it could be, all kinds of violence. And that is what we're here to talk about. And joining me in studio is Raphael Obonyo, who is from the UN Habitats Youth Advisory Board, and he's here to share his views about the He for She campaign. But our hashtag today is Africa Speaks. What will it take to end violence against women, violence against girls, or just violence against the girl child? You can share your views with us, and you can also tweet me at Joy Doreen Bira, and we'll be able to share those views of yours. Now, Raphael, without wasting much time, because we know there are going to be 15 days of activism for the United Nations on this very campaign, the He for She campaign. Why did they come up with He for She in the first place?
They came up with, United Nations came up with the He for She because, for a long time, campaigns that are geared towards tackling violence against women have always sidelined men, because they've always looked at men as the perpetrators of this violence. And so it's been about, we have to deal with those men. And it's out of the realization that that hasn't worked. It hasn't achieved much. Because for us to be able to deal decisively and more comprehensively with gender-based violence, we must bring together both the victims and the perpetrators. Our strategies must target both the victims and the perpetrators. And in most cases, perpetrators of gender-based violence are men. And so we need to reach out to these men. We need to help them change their attitudes. We need to help them start seeing women not as objects and properties, but as human beings. And so the dignity of women must be respected, not just by women, but also by men. And that is the reason why the campaign He for She was launched by the United Nations.
Right. I was just going through your Twitter profile, and I realized that you were taking this very serious. Orange Your World. Yeah. What exactly does that even mean for people who are part of this campaign for the next 15 days?
For the next 16 days, it's called the 16 Days of Activism. It starts with the International Day on Elimination of Violence Against Women in all its forms. And like you rightly put it, it's not just about sexual violence, it's violence in all its forms against women and against, gender, but particularly women. And it stretches all the way to the 10th of December when we have the International Human Rights Day. And the reason for that is to be able to link violence against women as a violation of human rights. Because if you deal with it as an isolated case of, this is an issue affecting women, it's not seen as a human rights issue. And so the only way to basically consolidate a global force and to mobilize public participation is to link it to human rights. And that's why we have the international, we have the 16 days of activism, which are actually linked to the International Human Rights Day.
Right. In Kenya, the He for She campaign was launched by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and there's some very, strong remarks that he made, and some people tended to agree and some people tended to disagree with his remarks. So would like to see what exactly he said, or to just go back to what he said on that day and see if you actually agree with that. Not that you are meant to go against the president, but you're expressing your opinion. Let's just take a look at that that remark and see what exactly he meant.
Histori ni kubwa sana hii, na ile imesemwa hapa. As I'm sure you're aware from the selfie posts on the newspapers and in social media, I've been out of the country for a few days. And during that time, this country has gone through a number of issues, none planned, none foreseen, but it has happened. The girls who have been undressed have not been undressed and stripped somewhere quiet. There has been umati kama huu ambao uko hapa, watching, but doing nothing, doing absolutely nothing. In fact, as Madam Nando says, we have been watching all this on this social media. Rather than doing something, tuko pale take pictures to post on social media. What did you do to help that person? You as a citizen. What is your responsibility as a citizen? Yes, the police should have done something. Yes, if they were there. Are the police going to be everywhere? Are the police in your home when your uncles are raping the 3-year-old child? Askari yako hapo ndio museme askari ndio amesababisha huyo mtoto anyanyaswe na uncle wake? Eh? Kulikuwa askari hapo? Eh? Yes, we must do more to improve security. I agree. But what are you doing? Wewe ambao uliwacha mtoto na huyo, mulimuacha akifanya nini? Yeah? Yeah? What is your responsibility? Yeah? We must get back down to the basics of asking, what is my responsibility?
And so those are the remarks of President Uhuru Kenyatta, and he's saying, what is your responsibility? But then he's also talked about, individual responsibility. What do you think of his remarks?
No doubt, Joy, I think everyone has a responsibility to ensure security and safety of, his or her security and safety and of the other person. To that extent, I agree with the President's remarks. But we must also realize that government has the primary responsibility of providing security and safety to its citizens. It is not about police being everywhere. It is not about having one police per citizen. It is about ensuring that we have laws that are working. It is about ensuring that we have a police force that can enforce these laws. And if people know that they can get away with this kind of crime, gender-based violence or issues of rape, sexual violence, they will continue perpetuating this kind of violence. And so that is why people are blaming the government. It's not about, people are not asking that police should be present everywhere. They're saying, look, we need to see action. We need to see police going after these people who are perpetrating gender-based violence. And also, I think it's dangerous for the president to ask citizens to deal with these kind of violations. Yeah. Because what we are going to see is emergence of vigilante groups. We are going to see people taking law into their own hands, and that is not what we want. We want these particular issues to be tackled within the rule of law, and that's why we're asking the police service to take charge.
When you say it's dangerous that he actually said that we should take our own responsibility, isn't that what we should have been doing a long time ago? Because by the time you actually beat up a woman, by the time you sexually violate her rights, doesn't that mean that you should be able to do better or think better? For instance, you know that what you're doing is wrong, but you go ahead and do it just because you think it's your right to actually get that. Especially in the African context, they always say it's a right, my conjugal rights are my rights. Yeah. So in this case, if a woman is violated in that regard, on the man's side, he actually thinks it's his right. On the lady's side, she's probably not even interested at the time. So that can be regarded as rape. And this happens not just in the outside community, it also happens inside the home or the house. So what would you say in this regard that he meant? Do you think that by him saying we should take up our own responsibility, and therefore he meant that, or he put it in a context that made people think that he was, perpetrating as well some of these wrongdoings?
Yeah, I think he would have said the same thing, but in a very different ways. And it came at a time that people have been asking, what is the government doing? Where is the government? Because people want the government to provide security and safety. People want the government to protect them. And so in your response, when you say, look, you have a role to play, where were you when all this was happening? It's like saying, don't blame me, blame yourself. That is not what people want at a time when you're seeing very horrendous incidences. So I don't think you should have said that. Nevertheless, like I did say, people, I mean, we all have a role and a responsibility. But having said that, Joy, you know, gender-based violence and incidents that we are seeing is just part of a deeper problem that we have in our society today, of gender inequality, where women are seen as objects, where women are seen as property, where women are seen to be subservient to, you know, to husbands and to male gender. And so there's a lot of resocialization that needs to take place. There's a lot of awareness creation that needs to take place. I mean, as much as we are coming up with laws, as much as we're putting up systems, I think there's also a lot of change of attitude that needs to take place. And that's why I'm saying we all have a responsibility, but not to the extent of the government saying you have a responsibility. Do what you can at your level. I think that is dangerous.
Right. We're having responses here, and a real man should protect, love, cherish, and take care of a lady and not strip her. This is an act of irresponsibility. And Michael Muse is saying men should view women as fellow human beings, not as their subjects. And we also have Samuel G here, who is saying, where the buck stops, true, to tackle violence against women, men must be involved. And he for she is a just cause by the United Nations. And when it comes to violence against young girls, how do you perceive that? Do you think that it is, it's, you know, like a generational thing? Because what we're seeing now is also that, you know, young teenagers are increasingly being violated.
I think it's a generational thing, in the sense that, I mean, the developing world, especially, I mean, countries like Kenya, people are getting to realize their rights. And there's a lot of this narrative about rights. People are getting to, what I would say, new levels of consciousness when it comes to rights. And so, more and more, young women are getting to demand their rights. And our generation, especially young people, young men, we say, look, that is not what has always happened in our society. Women have always been are supposed to be submissive to men. So we have sort of a generational shock where a woman tells you, I'll dress the way I want. That is not what used to happen, I mean, traditionally what used to happen. So because men are struggling to deal with this kind of, I mean, response, because men are struggling, I call it a crisis of modern masculinity. We feel there's lots of pressure. We are dealing with other pressures, both, you know, life and profession, I mean, our professional life and other aspects of our lives. Right. And then here comes a young woman who says, look, we have to agree on many things. How I dress, it is my right, it is my choice, like they rightly said.
It is my right, it is my choice.
It is my choice.
All right, just hold it right there. Now, we're going to take a very quick break, but when we return, we're going to be speaking to Amnesty International's Deputy Director for Campaigns. And joining me via phone from South Africa is Mulea Mwananyanda from Cape Town, and she is Amnesty International's Deputy Director for Campaigns in Southern Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. And you've done a number of health findings, and you've talked about the, you know, earlier on you talked about the findings that you've done on maternal health that have revealed, to an extent, sexual violence against women. Kindly enlighten us on that.
Okay, yes. So sexual violence against women is quite a widespread problem here in our region. Sometimes it's not talked about because it's considered as domestic and quite private. And so a lot of it is happening behind closed doors. But a lot of it is also being reported, but hardly being acted upon because women sometimes withdraw charges against their assailants. And there are many reasons that happens. You know, even though they do have the agency to know what is good or bad for them, most women don't have the autonomy to choose what they actually want. and it really, most of the time, just depends on the source of access they have, especially to economic rights and so on and so forth. So it becomes really, really difficult for them to negotiate their own freedoms. So that is basically what the problem is. The other problem is mainly the fact that sometimes our police officers deal with issues around domestic violence as private matters. So it just compounds the problem. And in South Africa specifically, we just released a report on maternal health. And in that report, it's really about sexual and reproductive rights and access to maternal services in South Africa. The problem is that a lot of women in the areas that we've conducted our research in cannot access those services because they fear that if they reveal their HIV status, for example, they will be attacked. And there have been stories of women being attacked because they were found to be HIV positive. So, you know, they are constantly victimized, and it's a major problem.
Right. And when it comes to, you know, violence, you know, after maternity or during or even before, what are the most common kinds of harassment that we are looking at in Southern Africa today?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, there are lots of, I can't give you any statistics because Amnesty International hasn't really conducted our own independent research on women who've been killed or who've been beaten up or assailed by people especially close to them. But what I can give you is anecdotal evidence, and the anecdotal evidence points to the fact that the most common forms of violence are assault, you know, so, you know, the attack on bodily integrity of women, and mostly perpetrated by people that are close to these women. And you see, you also have to remember that as women go out and become more economically independent, it's also creating tensions within the home, because our societies are basically very patriarchal. And so a woman's place was always supposed to be in the home, and now things have changed. Most of our political economies are now changing. The context is very different.
All right.
So we're also seeing, you know, more cases of, you know, reported violence against women.
Right. And how best do you think we can deal with violence against women? Very quickly, if you can tell us what your views are.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that needs to happen is that men have to start being really, really involved in this. So that's one part. Men getting involved. But secondly, also, governments should really act swiftly to address the problem. And one of the ways that they could do this is not just to have women's ministries headed by women, but to actually integrate men into that thought process, that a man can also head a woman's ministry, you know, and that they then can become champions around this. So it's really conscientizing our men, and as well as having, you know, a responsive government. But it's a concerted effort by everyone. So it's a change. It's a mental, attitudinal change that is required.
All right. Thank you so much. We do appreciate the time taken to speak to us on what's happening in Southern Africa regarding violence against women. Thank you so much. And that was Amnesty International's Deputy Director for Campaigns in Southern Africa, Mulea Mwananyanda, who was speaking to us. What do you think of her views?
Give very accurate remarks. I mean, things that are happening not just in Southern Africa, but across the continent, where, I mean, gender-based violence is seen to be a private matter, and you're asked to deal with it privately, and that way we silence and we actually muzzle young women and women who are suffering, and that most of gender-based violence is perpetrated by their partners, husbands. In fact, World Health Organization just released a report where they're saying it's more than 1 out of every 3 women are likely to suffer actually gender-based violence in their lifetime. And so her remarks are quite accurate.
Right. You know, she's talked partly about the Southern Africa cases, but what about East Africa? Are there any studies that have been conducted, and what are the findings? And where most do we find, you know, violence against women in East Africa?
In East Africa, actually, Tanzania is at 50, actually Eastern Africa, Tanzania is at 50% in terms of prevalence of gender-based violence. Ethiopia is at 71%. Kenya is at 45%. We are not doing so badly, but with the incidents that we've seen recently, I think it's really denting our reputation in terms of women's rights and in terms of gender equality.
And where countries like South Sudan factored in, because, you know, because the conflict that the country like that one has been going through, you're expected to see a lot of violence against women. Democratic Republic of Congo as well. Uganda could be actually having some of the highest rates. Yeah.
Certainly in war-torn countries, war-torn areas, women tend to suffer more, and gender-based violence tend to be on the rise. Although there hasn't been actually studies conducted in Southern Sudan, especially on issues of gender-based violence, I think in terms of statistics, there would be higher cases of gender-based violence in countries like Southern Sudan, DRC, Congo, Central Africa, that have been witnessing a lot of conflict and wars.
Right. Let's take a look at some of your views that are coming through Twitter. Prince James is saying women must be respected and not be violated. And we have Alex as well. This is Alex Omari, who is saying information is needed at all levels, national, community, to the individual. Awareness creation is key. And we also have Maurice Mbetu, who is saying, what about in a case where a man avoids all sorts of assault, but the woman forces him to violence? Good question. And we also have Boniface Mwangi, who is saying, are women catalyzing the whole issue of gender violence and end up hiding under the umbrella of human rights? That's also a good question right there. I stopped supporting the fight to end violence against women. It's time to end violence against all people. That is Fred Kennedy, who is sending that in. And we also have one coming in from Caleb, who is saying a real man should protect, love, cherish, and take care of a lady and not strip her. This is an act of irresponsibility. And we also have one coming in from John Minor, who is saying it starts with the family. Men should be taught how to respect women, starting with their mothers and sisters from an early age. And we also have, well, there are quite a number of them. I'll just take maybe one, two more. And Stephen is saying, focus for African issues and challenges and violence against women. Well, Bruno is saying, Doreen, people are overreacting. Nothing the president said was wrong. He dropped the facts. And finally, Mwinzi Joseph is saying violence against women is, well, a very great informative discussion. Thank you so much for all your views, comments, and also a lot of views coming through Facebook, but probably we'll keep the conversation going. What are your final remarks?
My final remarks is the dignity of women must be respected at all costs. It is so infuriating to hear of this victim blaming. There is no justification. There is no rationale. There is no reason why we should violate women's rights. We should strip women for whichever reason, whether it is because of what we call inappropriate dressing. We cannot address moral issues by engaging in violation of human rights.
Right.
And so all of us have a role to play. And I just want to echo the words of the UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, who said that all of us have a role to play. We must come forward and be seen, and we must ask ourselves, if it is not me, then who is doing it?
Right.
And if it is not now, when are we going to stop gender-based violence?
All right, and what role are you playing as an individual to stop violence against women, or at least end violence against women? That's the question that remains very unanswered in many sects around the country and the continent. But we've come to the end of the show. Let's keep the conversation going. Africa Speaks is the hashtag. What will it take to end violence against women? My name is Joy Doreen Bira. God bless.